and welcome to Preacher to Teacher. My name is Terry, and I'm excited to continue the conversation that we're having with teachers and students about the classroom. Today, we're honored to have Coach Howard with us, and he oversees our in-school suspension students. So I thought it'd be really awesome to have him on the channel so that we might be able to learn from him. So, Coach Howard, tell me what a typical day looks like for you in ISS.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the
Absolutely.
podcast. Typical day for me is generally based on the conduct that happens the day before previous. So I can have a student in there anywhere from skipping to uh, bullying incidents, not necessarily any vaping or fighting, depending on the category. But most of the things I get classroom behavior conduct, misbehaving in the bathroom, stuff like that. So any fights, any illegal paraphernalia, that doesn't come in. But a typical day comes in where kids walk in. I don't know what they're there for, so I have to ask them. And once they tell me, we engage in ways to correct their behavior.
Cool.
So that's primarily what I do for them. Not only just to bring them in, is to try to get them to see the errors of their ways, find a way to correct it, and move back out to the regular school society.
Cool. So I had a kid say something that, even this morning, I had a kid tell me he was a bad kid.
Right.
And I told him there are no bad kids, there are good kids that make bad decisions. And so, talk to me about what you've learned about students who end up in ISS.
Well, what I've learned is there's a lot of kids that come to ISS that either have a combination of one thing or the other, from social economic issues to parents who are in some sort of addiction to physical abuse, or just generally neglect, or lack of a better phrase. So when you sit down and you talk to them and you ask them what their normal daily home life is like, to try to gauge what might be prompting their behavior, you find out that a lot of these kids are living with grandparents, aunts and uncles, or they're living with parents who are present at home but actually has no presence in the child's life. So children are going home, latchkey kids, cell phone. They're going home by themselves all day. They're left to their own devices to figure out what to do and how to manage themselves on a regular basis. You ask them about it, they begin to tell you the story that unravels about why they might be making some of the judgment calls, because there's no one giving them the advice and counsel on how to avoid those mistakes, or how to recognize when that behavior is coming up. And that would be the downside to it all. Is most of them at the end of the day are just asking for somebody to spend time with them and teach them. That's what I spend my time in ISS doing. When I took the job, I understood what it was about. I understood what it was for. I just didn't have it. Having 30 years of military experience, it just wasn't in me to be mean to someone just because I had the authority.
Mm-hmm.
When there's an opportunity to reach and teach a group versus sit down, be quiet, don't talk, do your work. Mm-hmm. You can still do that and still get the child to understand how to correct behavior. The thing I see in the transition for me that actually made it kind of hard to transition from military to teaching was people understand discipline, they don't understand punishment. They don't understand discipline and punishment. How one has to play off the other in order for the child to get a corrective measure. Because that's what it's about. The child broke a rule, they have to be punished, they need to be disciplined. Discipline is about corrective behavior and action. Sitting a child in a room and just telling them to go do that with no interaction to correct that mistake is that a punishment or discipline? That's just punishment. The child will walk out the door, commit the exact same act and phrase because they don't have an avenue to correct it. So
I read a book, I think it was Raising Self-Reliant Children, that talked about the attempt to rehabilitate people that have never been habilitated to begin
Right.
with. They didn't use the terms that you use as far as discipline versus punishment. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Obviously, it seems like punishment, ISS or OSS, right? In
Right.
school or out of school suspension. What might be some things that teachers or schools can do on the discipline side of things?
So on the discipline side of things, I know from being in a meeting with them in the early planning period that Dean Israel really restricted to how to enforce the disciplines and punishments he would love to do, or based on the Florida statute. So the discipline aspect is if you kid gets caught vaping, there's no recourse for the child other than the 45 days or whatever, 10 to 45 days citation. Go to court, figure it out. That's something you just can't afford.
Our hands are tied.
Your hands are tied on
Okay.
something. A child skipping school, however, that's a whole different ballgame because if you skip school, you thought about it. So when I was in the military, I used to tell my sailors, you have omission and commission. You do things because you didn't know any better and you did them, or you did it by commission. You knew it was wrong and you did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child is making an error through omission, you have to correct that behavior before you punish that behavior. If a child is doing it for commission, like, why did you skip school, little Timmy? I felt like, okay, now what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to fix that behavior? Because you made a conscious choice at that time to leave campus. You didn't care the consequences. You only care about your actions. So you find a way to not only give them discipline, but give them discipline and punishment. So maybe the process could be twofold. You're going to spend 5 days in ISS, but in the 5 days you spend in ISS, you're going to go do parking lot duty. At some point in the day, your job is to walk around campus to make sure all kids are in class. I know they can't do it. This is a hypothetical. But find a way for them to be able to activate their own thinking of how can I avoid this mistake?
Mm-hmm.
How can I keep from reoffending?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I would try to differentiate between discipline and punishment. I'm not here to say anybody's doing a bad job.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm
Sure.
saying at all, because I understand what the limitations are,
Sure.
or the parameters in which they have to work.
Sure.
I think a lot of teachers' hands are tied themselves because some of the discipline the dean has referred to them can be handled in a classroom. Again, always have the outliers where you don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have things where I have a say-so or choice in what happens with this child, and I think teachers are first line disciplinarians.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's just how I feel about it.
I think I only wrote 5 referrals this year, which is about a third, I think, of what I wrote last year. And one of the adjustments that I made was that I did not see every disobedience as an assault on my authority as a teacher, right? So, I discovered, man, these kids are coming to my classroom, in some cases, a mess. And so and you experienced those in ISS, so I adjusted how it was that I interacted with the kids. And most of the time, in fact, most of the referrals were very early on in the year. I don't think hardly any were the second semester because now I have a relationship with them and I know them better. Now I know how to redirect the challenges that are presented in the classroom based on the students. So can you talk to me a little bit about that, what you see and experience, what you've seen in their lives or in a classroom where, without giving any names, where teachers might be able to do better on instead of seeing everything as a personal affront to what other tools they might use?
Well, first, we have to understand that children want to be disciplined. They want the corrective action and behavior. A lot of their issues is based on trust and belief. If a child doesn't believe that they trust you and believe in you, then you trying to correct them, they would just rather let the be. Because the common thing I even told my own children, people want attention. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad attention. If I can get attention from you, I'll take it. I don't care what it's wrapped in.
Sure. I
got attention. So we have to learn as adults to differentiate between how we hand out that attention. If we not necessarily ask for behavior or present the behavior we want from them as a request by giving them authority, then you get back what you're hoping for or what you're requesting from the child. So I think first of all, a lot of it starts with the adult involved with the child. We have to differentiate adults and children. We are not on the same level playing field. We just aren't. So one of the things that I do when they come in is I try to build a trust rapport first. By introduction. Every child comes in, got to introduce themselves to me, I introduce myself to them. I explain the rules to them of how we're going to be able to ISS. Once we establish the ground rules, now let's get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to work means let's unravel who you are before we get to what you did. Once we unravel who you are and get to what you did, you got to find a way to get them to accept responsibilities for just their part. I don't really unpack what the teacher did. I unpack what they did in their part, because in any involvement in an incident, there's two parts that took place. It's your part and their part. You got to worry about your part of the incident before you focus on the other part of the incident. If they can get that down, then I can go back and explain to them the teacher's requirement. So once we get little whoever to figure out this, oh, this is where my mistake came from. Okay, cool. Now can you see what the teacher's interaction was based on your behaviors and actions? It's all reactionary responses to each other. You weren't sitting in your seat. The teacher asked you to sit down. Instead of you sitting down when you were asked the first time, you replied back. That's where you went wrong. Obey the first time biblically. Do what you're told to do the first time. If you do what you're told and asked to do by the first time, the second time doesn't exist. But we have to get to a point to where children understand. And that's from 5 to 18. Understand the dynamics of who is in control. Part of that is I don't really believe in what I like to call chest stomping. I don't believe you got to stomp your feet, beat your chest to get somebody to understand and pay attention. I think you have to find a way to reach them to get your point across in a manner that gives respect and demands respect back. What I mean by that is you and I are having a conversation. If I'm talking to you in a calm tone and I'm addressing you as sir, ma'am, whatever, no matter what your interactions is, you have no energy to fuel your anger because I'm not giving it to you. I'm only requiring you to understand that you're upset, I'm not. I'm giving you respect that you're not returning. At some point in that conversation, you should realize, wait a minute, they're not mad. No. So it's a way of finding a unique way to de-escalate situations, but still get your point across, still demand the respect that you deserve. That's being the adult and teacher in the classroom. Getting everything you're supposed to do while maintaining control of your classroom, because what the difference for me is I don't have 25 kids. I might have only 6. But yet still, when I'm dealing with one child, all the other 5 are listening to the conversation to try to pick where they can deviate or slide over and start acting out because, okay, well, he's not paying attention. And to stop that conversation with one and go, sir, man, I'm talking to another sir, man. I need you to finish your work. Same tone that I'm having a conversation with, but I don't elevate. And if I feel like I have to, I let them know ahead of time. I've asked you numerous times to stop. The next time I ask you, it will not be in this tone. It will not be in this manner. I will only ask you one more time. If you refuse to take this heed this morning, my next step, I have no choice but to bring it again. But I would rather you and I fix this than to have to involve you. And they get that. They get the, okay, well, again, I'm not being yelled at, screamed at, or dismissed. I'm being educated, which is the whole sole purpose, is to try to educate. So it's not a perfect way. It's truly my way. And a lot of my ways of dealing with these kids are based off of 15 years of military leadership experience. For us, in the military, if I write you up, that's failed leadership on my part, because the first thing they ask you when you write another service member up is, what did you do to prevent this action from happening? Not oh yeah, let's go. It's what did you do to prevent it? So for the military, it keeps us thinking all the time, how can I solve my own problem without having a commanding officer solve that problem for me? Because if he's solving my problem, I'm not doing my job. I'm ineffective.
Now you're you're working on your master's degree for counseling, correct?
Correct.
Do you think that the relationship teachers have with themselves, or the understanding that they have of themselves, plays a role in how they deal with discipline? And would you have any advice on how to encourage teachers to get to know themselves better so that they can be more comfortable with challenges to their authority in a classroom?
Yes. first I gotta say I think all teachers start this job with the intention to do better and to correct, to provide education for a better society. That's the first thing. I also think by watching teachers like yourself and other teachers' classrooms I've gone in, that you guys are facing a ton of restrictions. Those restrictions within themselves limit your ability to one, work on you and the children you teach. Because you came into the job again to make that child better. Then you look at the state standards and requirements, and you have to say, I can't make them better the way I want to. I have to make them better within a box that I'm given.
It's true.
So if I'm given this little bitty 4x4 inch box, this is what I got to make 25 kids get in this box. Well, what about all the stuff that's not in the box that I can't fit in? That becomes to me a mental battle for you as a teacher. How can I take all the information I know would benefit them and make it fit in a 4-inch box that the state gave? So you're not really being able to go to your full potential as a teacher, which might make you question, why did I get into this job? What am I really doing it for if I can't fully explore my own abilities to teach? So the one thing I will say is, as a guy who actually is selfish in mental health, is you always have to try to find ways to take care of yourself. Whether that's a biblical quiet time in the morning, just a quiet meditation in the morning, a quiet meditation when you're doing your lunch break, something for you. You got to find time in the day that you take out just for you. If you can find that time for you, you can handle whatever else is going to come in that day. Deal with things one thing at a time and not 20 things at a time. Because if you can get 50 different things to do, you're only going to do one at a time. It doesn't matter. Prioritizing the event of those 50 things will teach you how to structure your day. What is your first priority? First priority for you should be you. Take care of you in the morning. Second priority is, what is next on my day I have to outside of my family and me, because that's taking care of me. What is the most important thing I have to do when I get to school? And no matter what else is happening in that day, my first priority is to take care of that. If I take care of the most pressing issue I have, everything else will fall in line. We'll be able to move through the day. So that's the advice I would give. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the advice I would give, because if I don't know how many teachers are here. That's 50 different personalities trying to find one commonality. And that's just to get a kid to do the right thing, to educate a child. A lot of times, I think adults don't realize that adult to adult, we can educate each other. So if two teachers are next to each other, you have to have the same lunch break. And if you don't know them, get to know them. If you do know them, inquire. Because you never know what will happen in the one day that you might say, hey Terry, what's going on with you today? You might unload some information that you've been holding on for a while that you needed help with. You may not, like me as a new teacher, if I'd have gone in the classroom this year, I would have had to depend on someone else to teach me how to teach. I would have needed that guidance, that counseling, like how to manage my classroom, how to manage a lesson plan, how to deliver information that I was unsure about. So you need other adults to give you counsel to be able to move forward. When we isolate and retract within ourselves, we isolate from everyone else who can help us. And now your fellow teachers, your administration becomes more of a challenge or avoidance. You want to avoid them because, well, I got to get a teacher evaluation. So let me overreact to a normal process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
True.
You teach every day. The principal coming in the room shouldn't change what you teach every day, but it does. Because you want to make sure that everything you've been teaching for the last 2 weeks before they walked in the door, you can wrap that up in a nice present, not to only educate your students, but impress your boss. When my mind and theory is you should be impressing your boss every day, whether they're in the room.
That's correct. Agreed. Yeah, I agree.
So
let me give you an example of what you were describing. I'll be a bit transparent. So
Okay.
like I did not know that a thing called the Enneagram, which is a personality type indicator, existed when I was in my 20s. And so if I would have gone into education in my 20s, into teaching when I was in my 20s, I would not have known about certain aspects of my personality, namely that I'm very much driven by image and what people think of me,
Right.
and that either is going to be used as a good thing or a bad thing, and you can respond to that part of your personality in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. And the less you know about it, the more likely you are to respond
Right.
in unhealthy ways. So if I would have had a discipline issue, I would have immediately thought about my image among my peers and administration instead of seeing it in light of what it is the child is going through in the classroom. And so I think knowing ourselves, like you're describing, is so critical to being a good educator, because if we don't know where our shadows lie, it's going to be projected onto our kids.
Right. So when you talk about personality types and the differences, you have your type A personality, which is your foregoer. You have your type B, which is more your passive aggressive. Forget what C, and down the line. But the main two that most people focus on is type A, type B personality. Who's the front runner? Who's the person that's got to be up front? Have to have control, very direct. Who's the person that wants to sit back with a more passive behavior, allow things to kind of go back and forth, and then assert themselves through non-aggressive, non-confrontational behavior. So I don't think there's anything wrong with looking inward before you speak out, before you look out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the problem is when you look too much in, you forget to look out. Also, you can have an issue with caring too much. So caring too much can project yes, you're personalizing and you're projecting an image on the child that the child can't return back to. It's not like you're to a friend or a partner in life. You're voicing your child or concerns to a child who can't, one, understand the complexities of your life, two, give you advice on how to fix it. So a lot of times I think there's a issue with transference and counter-transference. You're transferring your feelings onto a child who can't return that back. And if they could, they're going to unload on you with a set of circumstances that you can't process for them. So that's a matter of just, man, it's okay. Everybody looks at their image. I worry about my image every day. Quite sure the principal worries about his image. The president worries about their image. We all do it. It's just a matter of trying to know how much you're doing. And trying not to be a me, I person. So it's just it's different ways to do it. It's ways to care about you and other people. There's ways to do it. Now, can I tell you all? No, I can't. Have I figured it out? I don't know. I hope I did. Right.
Yeah.
But I can say my wife is a huge connection. So I can talk to my wife about bounce things back. Meeting you this year, a sounding board. Hey, I don't know if this makes any sense, but to have someone you can just go to that you, like we literally learned each other this year, that I could go to and say, hey, does this make any sense to you? What did you think about the situation? I agree with your position, or I see where you're going, but I don't quite agree with that, because that little piece of information can reel you back in, and maybe I was overthinking. Maybe what I was thinking is not. Maybe I misinterpreted this information. Maybe I misread the interaction between me and Will. So, I look at my actions toward you before I look at your actions toward me. So I'm going to gauge my behavior based off of presentation from the two.
Sure.
Now, if I present to you wrong and you respond to it, well, first thing I ask is, what did I do? Not what did he do.
Okay, cool.
You know what I mean? Now, if out of the blue you walk up and you start lambasting me or something, okay, that's
on
you.
It's on me. Sure.
But now,
absolutely.
instead of having a aggressive reaction to it, why not try to figure out, okay, something's wrong, because that's not as usual or their usual demeanor. What's wrong? Now, if they're that way every day,
Time to move on.
time to move on.
That's right.
And it's okay. It's okay to disengage and move on.
Absolutely. Now, you and I have developed an awesome relationship this year. Absolutely have loved it,
Yes.
and we're going to miss you if you're not around next year. But what we talked a little bit about this being conversational and an opportunity for you to ask me any questions that you would want. So, do you have any questions for me?
I have quite a lot of questions. I don't know if we have
Okay.
time, but what I want to know is, being in pastoral services,
Sure.
how did you transition into it?
So, I had a year of non-education work as I delivered for Amazon, and that was helpful for me. I actually, this is going to sound weird, but I fell in love with human beings again,
Yes.
and I met with people that were so very diverse than anybody I'd ever worked with before in my life, and I reconnected with human beings in a way that I had forgotten, decades ago. So that was a powerful thing for me, and so it really set the stage for coming into education. And I had this aha moment. I think it was from God that directed me this way, and but um, the transition was, about 18 months or so, 16 months, 18 months between when I stopped full-time campus-based ministry to when I started here. So there was a lot of healing and growing that took place in my life then during that transition time. But this job is everything that really I would have hoped for, because I get to invest in the future every day. And the kids are going to respond differently to that. Um, but one of the things that I discovered is every kid is being impacted in a different way, and most of them just don't tell you. And I think maybe that causes teachers to react to in ways related to discipline that are born out of frustration because they don't feel like they're being effective. Well, kids just aren't going to tell us that kind of stuff usually, and I'm blessed to have seniors because at graduation they usually tell you.
Right.
And not all of them, but I've discovered many times this year that I was having an impact on kids that I had no clue. I didn't even know if they liked me. Like they come into the room like, I don't like that you exist, Mr.
Right.
Layton, right? But what I discovered was no, they're being that way not because they are disgusted with you or the class. They're being that way because in this space it's safe for them to be transparent about how it is that they're feeling about life in general. So my experiences in pastoral ministry helped me learn how to navigate those challenges. And obviously how I have to navigate them here is different, but it prepared me for that.
I'm glad you said that because, like I said, I had a chance to come in and sit for the last half a year in classes.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed was they were very receptive to the way you instruct. I mean, you teach in a manner that allows kids to just sit and absorb. Uh, not, I don't know anybody else's teaching style. I can only tell about the one I watched you sit. I like the way that your lessons are always interactive.
Mm-hmm.
You pose a question, let them think about it for a few seconds. They come back, and now it's a discussion. For me, as a guy who had learning disabilities, I like that because I also, even though I do have the information, was still learning from you. But I watched your children respond to you, and I watched them open up to you to explain their differences. Even in the conversations where you talk about economics and politics, to watch them voice their opinion about it, not get upset, not get mad, tell you how they feel, engage in conversation with you. You in turn engage with them and put them at ease. It's impressive to me, man.
Well, thank you.
And I kept coming back for that reason because every day I watched you every day. Not the same way, not the same manner and tone, but every day I watched you find a different way to reach those kids.
Well, thank you.
And it meant a lot to me just to be able to sit. And that's what I'm gonna do for my 5th grade class.
Cool.
I'm gonna go back to class.
Cool.
So the other question I have is, what would you say has been your most difficult challenge in education or reaching a student?
Yeah. The most difficult student to reach is the one that is aggressive and communicating they don't want to be. usually the one actually that needs reached the most, right? And so I never try to push them ahead of schedule. I've had a student. There's one student in particular that I'm thinking of that was very unresponsive, loved to sleep. There are different philosophies of how to deal with a student that just wants to put their head down and disengage. The kid ended up doing fairly well in the class, but he would just never turn in work, which means you're probably failing the class. I sent a postcard. I did all the stuff you're supposed to do: email home, phone call home, guidance off, all that stuff, right? But it was a postcard sent to him that said, "Hey, I want you to know I believe in your potential, and I believe in you." It's like the next week he turned in every missing assignment that there was. For me, it's trying to find the most difficult thing is to try to find ways to reach kids that present to you that they don't want to be reached. And reaching isn't, in the academic sense, reaching them is we don't, kids are not an object so that we can make sure that they get their grades so we can jump through our administrative hoops. No, these are human beings that are valuable and are of enormous worth, right? And so we don't reach them as objects. We reach them as unique human beings that matter. And so ultimately, we believe that every kid is capable and can accomplish something. They may not all be able to achieve it at the same level, and that's okay because those kids are going to achieve something very different. There's one kid on our campus who's already working on diesel engines, but he struggles academically. Well, he's going to achieve things in the diesel world that I'll never achieve because he's gifted in different ways. So I never have every student getting an A as a goal, but I do have a hope that every student will at least move toward accomplishing something that they might not accomplish otherwise if they didn't feel like they mattered in my classroom.
Right. So that leads me to two more questions. One, I'll start with this one first. The you matter sign. That's impressive because every Friday I hear you tell those kids, or every day actually I hear you tell those kids. What's the thought behind the you matter?
Yeah. That started my first year teaching about halfway through the first semester, and I discovered how many times my students were being told they're stupid, that they'll never amount to anything, like you and I have talked about some of the challenges students face, like in 2 days they graduate, and some of the kids are being kicked out of their house, and it's hard to believe that you're worth anything. And if you're not worth anything, why should I even try? Why try an education? Why try to get a job? Why try to go to college? Why try anything? And so I decided that when I finally came to realize exactly how difficult it was in the lives of students, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them, I said, I cannot let them leave my room without letting them know that they matter. And so that unknowingly, I started saying that a lot, and then it became a thing, and then I put it on the wall, and then I put it on the door, and then they gave me a T-shirt, and so then it became a thing, right? And it resonated with the kids, even the kids that I didn't think valued it. I was absent one day, on a Friday, and I put, "It's Friday, I want to remind you that you matter." And a kid sends me a message, "I was concerned I wasn't going to hear that I mattered today, and you put it on the board. And I knew it was going to be okay because you remembered to tell us that we mattered." It's emotional to me to consider because that's the kind of stuff that the kids are coming in our classrooms with. And so you matter has become a really big thing. They may put it on my tombstone when I die. We'll see. But,
So asking that question leads me to this. I watched you a week or so ago take out notes that you had kids write to themselves at the beginning of the year. And then you wrote a note to them and you handed it to them. I watched those kids walk in this door, did that note, forgot they had even written it. Read what they had written earlier and what you wrote to them, and every one of them got it. What was the theory behind that
so
exercise?
the exercise that I saw originally was what I think I saw it on YouTube. Honestly, the first part of it. What do you love? What do you hate? What do you hope to accomplish your senior year? What do you hope to accomplish after graduation? That part I saw, and then I originally was going to then give it back to them to see at the end of the year. But as the year went on, You Matter began to evolve, and you develop these connections with students, and I said, if I really believe they matter, then and I've done my job as an educator in engaging every student one to one, so that they know that they matter, then I should know something about every student. And so I was like, I can communicate that by, instead of just handing them back the document that they wrote, I can add my 2, 3, 4 sentences, and to be one last way to reinforce that they matter. And you're right, it is interesting because you hold up the paper and like, anybody know what this is? And they're like, what is that? Well, this is what you wrote yourself. And they're like, oh, wow. And then they open it up and they see that it was handwritten. And in third period, I had a student who was like, these can't be personalized. And he read his neighbors, and it was different. And he was like, oh, these are personalized.
Yeah.
And he immediately puts it in his pocket, and because now he knows that I care for him. And so, yeah, it kind of just happened. The idea was just, you're starting senior, you end a senior, but in between, I developed a relationship with the kids.
That should be, you think about like how we go through. If I could write my younger self a letter, that's what came to mind when I saw it. If I could write myself a letter, which they kind of did.
They did.
At the beginning of the year, they wrote themselves a letter about, hey, when you get here, these are the things you be challenged. I thought it was a really, really neat idea, man. Cool. And it just showed the level and depth that you go to make sure that not only do they matter, but they understand how much they matter. That any part of their day, if they thought about it, they go, Mr. Wayman loves me.
Yeah.
And that's impressive.
And I do.
That it shows. I gotta change. I don't hand out compliments lightly. I tell people all the time. Because if I try not to do it openly. It's hard for me to hide some feelings. Because if I don't really trust or like people, I won't engage with them. I'll be friendly to them, but I just don't engage with them. I don't want to give off those false pretenses that something exists between us that does.
Sure.
So watching you and getting to know you over this past year, man, it's just been absolutely phenomenal. Growth, personal. I grew personally from the conversation. I learned differently, and like I said, I watched you build. You built these young adults up, and I only got to see 6 months of it, but I watched you build young adults up. Do you ever reflect back on the impact that you have on your life?
So, because of, I actually have students show up at my house because they all know where I live. Right. And it's funny, at the beginning of this year senior class, I told them where I live. They're like, oh, Mr. Wayman, we're crazy. You don't want us to know where you live, because there's some of us that are nuts. And, but then by the middle of the year, you see these changes take place, and they're like, no one's gonna go mess with Mr. Wayman's house, and then it shifts to, you know what? If there's a place I need to go to be safe, I'm going to Mr. Wayman's house. That's not 100% of them, because different kids have different relationships, and some of them have extended family that loves and cares for them. But there are other kids that, there was a night I was in bed and a kid showed up on a motorcycle in my front yard, and I'm like, I think one of my students is here, and he was overjoyed that he bought a motorcycle, and he wanted to be able to share it with somebody, and so he drove to my house, and so I got out of bed. I didn't tell him I was in bed. Turned on all the lights and went out and saw his motorcycle, right? So, kids talk, and so I don't know all of the stories, but I know that in some of their lives, and I open my house every Monday night, It's called a gathering, and anybody that needs a safe place to talk and
Right.
deal with life can.
That's nice.
And former students come, and especially like right now, I've had students come back from college, and it's just an opportunity for them. I feed them, we feed them dinner, and just take care of whatever's going on, and so they do come back, and they do talk to me, and they share with me, what is happening in their life, and so I do get to experience some of that. Not all of it, obviously, but some I do.
That's impressive. Again, like I said, it didn't say impressive. Just law crazy.
Well, thanks.
All day long, man. 'Cause that's a rarity,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think a lot of people realize, understand, or realize and understand the impact one person can make on a large number of people.
Mm-hmm.
So with the mentality, if I can just change one mind a day, I can change the world. If we all thought that way, how much better would we be if we all thought? I just got to change one.
Yep.
I don't have to change all of them,
Mm-hmm.
just one. Because like the conversations you and I have spanned across politics, social, racial injustices.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed you for a class, which I got a very good grade on. Happy about that. So I just think people such as yourself making these small differences just to get into a kid's life. Like I said earlier, if a kid trusts or knows that you trust, that they can trust you and that you care and love them, they will run through whatever they need to
Mm-hmm.
because you ask them.
Mm-hmm.
They will try to improve themselves because if no one else cares, he or she can.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do whatever. I will take care of myself based on the fact that I know someone else loves me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a lot of these kids are gonna, for some, hopefully none. Hopefully none of them experience anything traumatic or tragic.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if that's the case.
We know some will.
Some will, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to like the presentation of you wanting them to know they matter might change that whole perception.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every time I hear it, I'm like, I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is one.
Oh.
There's one, I don't want to say his name, but there's one young man that was in your class. You know which grade I'm talking about. That I remember him being way different. And when I saw him as a senior, watched him how his life had changed, and recognized that somebody cared for him. So because he cared, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be what it's about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like we could keep going.
Yeah.
But if you're a teacher and you've actually listened to all of this and you still made it, we have an opportunity to not just see this as a job to get a paycheck. That beyond the clocking out on the contract, there are young people that are experiencing horrible things, and what we bring to the classroom has an opportunity to have a powerful impact on the lives of our kids. I have a kindergarten teacher, a friend of mine, that does the same thing. She powerfully invests in little kindergartners, knowing that even as they go on, they still come years later hugging her because they know that teacher cares a ton for them. So if you're a teacher and you're discouraged, if you've seen my channel before, you know I always end with the same slogan: you matter, and what you do matters. And so if you're discouraged, would you just hang on a little bit, like we end this week? But if you're not done yet, hang on a little bit, refresh, retool over the summer, go back to school next fall, and realize that you have been given gifts and abilities to teach things. You also have been given gifts and abilities to make an impact in the lives of kids. And so as we do that together, if more and more of us, it transforms public education and it'll transform kids' lives. Thanks. Remember, you matter.